But I need to ask you 4 questions. Some of you may have heard these questions to see if you are qualified to be vestry members. So here's the first question. How do you put a giraffe in a refrigerator?
Can you say that again?
How do you put a giraffe in a refrigerator? You open the refrigerator, put the giraffe, and close the door. This question tests whether you tend to do simple things in an orderly or overly complicated way. Here's the second question. How do you put an elephant into a refrigerator? The wrong answer is open the refrigerator, put in the elephant, and close the door. The correct answer is to open the refrigerator, take out the giraffe, put in the elephant, and close the door. This tests your ability to think through the repercussions of your actions. Here's the third question. The Lion King is hosting an animal conference. All the animals attend except one. Which animal does not attend?
The elephant.
The correct answer is the elephant. Because it's in the refrigerator. This tests your memory. Here's the fourth question. There is a river that you must cross, but it is inhabited by crocodiles. How do you manage to get across? You swim. All the crocodiles are attending the animal conference. This tests whether you learn quickly from your mistakes. According to Anderson Consulting Worldwide, around 90% of the managers that they gave this test to flunked it. But they also gave it to preschoolers, and the majority of them passed it. Their conclusion was it disproves the theory that most management consultants have the brains of a 4-year-old. They don't even have that level of achievement. There are so many books that are written about leadership. You can, go to a bookstore, 10 ways to achieve leadership, 7 ways. If you do this, you'll be successful. There are all kinds of books. Some of them are great, and some of them are not so good. One of the authors that I have read for several years now is James Autry. James Autry was a CEO of a large corporation. He is a writer, a poet. His wife was lieutenant governor of Iowa. He writes a lot about his son who is autistic. In one of the books, The Servant Leadership, or The Servant Leader, rather, he lists 5 ways of being that moves us towards the work of being a servant leader. And so I want to briefly talk about those 5 things that I think would be helpful for all of us to understand. The first one is to be authentic. There's a story about a young businessman who had just opened up his first business, and he was very excited about the possibilities in the future. He designed his office with all kinds of very fine antiques. He spared no money on that. So he's in his office one day, and he sees someone come into the outer office of his business. And no one was in front of him. So he picked up the phone, and he began to talk, and he called out numbers, and he talked about orders, and he was talking about all kinds of things that would, in this particular moment, would hopefully tell the other person that he was successful. After about 5 minutes of playing this game on the phone, he hung it up and he asked the man, "Can I help you?" The man said, "Yeah, I've come to activate your phone lines." Sometimes we think that we are somebody when we're really not. And we want to portray to other people that we know what we're doing. And so one of the things that Autry says is to be authentic. I will tell you, this is something that I have learned since being your bishop. I knew what it was like to do ministry from being a chaplain in a hospital. So moving from the chaplaincy position to a parish, it all flowed well. That's what you learn in seminary. What you don't learn in seminary is what to do with being a bishop. All I knew about being a bishop is what I had seen others do. And a lot of times that clashed with who I was. And so I would think, is this a bishopy thing to do? Is this how bishops act? And I wrestled with that for a long time until maybe yesterday I began to understand that you gotta be who you are. And if it's not a bishopy thing to do, that's okay because it's what you do. It's who you are. You can't be something that you're not. But we try to do that sometimes because we want to impress the people that may be looking at us. Don't worry about those people who are looking at you. They don't have anything else to do. But be aware of who you are in the moment. The second thing that Audrey says is to be vulnerable. I was watching the news several months ago when they were showing a group of Marines coming back from war. And the camera happened to latch on to this particular Marine who was big and stout. And they showed his son running to him, and this big Marine reached down and picked up his son. And the camera happened to be in the place where they could see his face, and tears were coming down. The captain, who was big and stout. It touched me that he could be vulnerable like that with his son, and not be the typical image that we think of Marines. We have to be vulnerable, and being vulnerable doesn't mean that you are not in control. It just means that you are aware of who you are and what you're about at that moment. We are in touch with our feelings. We're in touch with our thinking. It is being honest. Being vulnerable means that we can make mistakes, and we can admit those mistakes, and then ask, how can we fix this? So being vulnerable is the second thing that Audrey writes about. Be accepted. He writes, acceptance is more important than approval. This is true in friendship and in marriage, parenting, as well as in professional relationships. Somehow we think that marriage and in the church we're supposed to do things right and always agree with the person next to us. Raise your hand if you've never had an argument with your spouse. If you raise your hand, I'm going to tell you that you probably need to work on your marriage. I had a come to me. This was years ago when we lived in Ashland, Kentucky. This was in the 80s, when I was doing a lot of marriage and family work. And the husband said, we've been married for 20-something years, and we have never argued. And I said, wow, you must not have a very good marriage. And he got angry. I said, how can you live with somebody for that long a time and never rub the wrong way? Jesus and the disciples didn't always agree. And they were only together for 2 years. We have to accept people where they are. It doesn't mean that we have to accept their idea, their opinion. But what does the prayer book say in the baptismal covenant? To respect the dignity of every human being. We must always respect that dignity of the human being, the person across from us, that we disagree. That's what accepting is. It's not accepting necessarily their ideas, but it's accepting that person for who they are. You accept them in times of disagreement. Accept them in times of agreement. The fourth, he says, be present. The fourth way of being is to be present. My son called me not long ago. He is in seminary. And he said that they were sitting around in a class talking about what is the greatest tool that they need to take with them from seminary to their first cure. That is, their first place of work when they finish seminary. And they were talking about all kinds of things. well, seminary teaches you to have tools. He says, yeah, but what do you think is the most important? And I said, well, you're going to think that I'm a little nuts. But the first thing that I think of is to show up. And he said, what? He said, you've got to show up. You've got to be present. Because so many times we don't really show up. I said, if somebody calls you at 2 in the morning and says, I'm at the emergency room, you better put on your britches and get there. But getting there physically is only part of it. You've got to be present. You've got to pay attention to what is going on in that meeting, in that conference that you're having with someone in your office. Or whether you're at the hospital, you've got to be present. You don't want to be talking to somebody and then looking all around. You're not present. You got to show up at that moment. There's nothing more embarrassing than to be in a meeting and then raise your hand and say, can we talk about so-and-so? And then the person leading the meeting says, we did about 20 minutes ago. I've been there. The one who said, can we talk about it? You got to be present. And the last thing that he talks about, which is my favorite, is to be useful. How many of your mothers said, don't just stand there, do something? My mother used to say that to me a lot. You got to be useful. The leaders are people who find resources for the common good. They are the ones who are giving the tools to the people that they're working with so that they can accomplish their mission, their work. You have to be useful. And then he outlines that with this. Leadership has nothing to do with controlling people. It is easy to be a bully. It's easy to bully people into something. That's an easy thing. But leadership is not about that. Leadership is about giving, and it is about caring for people and being a useful resource for them. Leadership is about being present with people and building community. Leadership is letting your ego go and also letting the territory that you want to defend and say, this is mine. Letting that go. It is being authentic. Leadership is creating a space where people want to be present, a place where they enjoy to come. So your job as vestry members is to create a place where people really want to be there. It is home for them. I grew up in a church that was so good at this part. I really knew that they wanted me to be there. Leadership is about paying attention, and it requires love. If you can't love, then you don't need to be in a leadership position. So those are the things that Audrey kind of kicks off in his book about what really is the bedrock of leadership. Now shift gears just a little bit, because they'll talk about this later on, but I hear a lot about duties. What is the duty of the vestry? And I'm not going to go into that a lot, except to tell you these things. The role of the vestry is to take care of the finances of the church, to care for the building, and to choose the leaders, such as the rector. And in consultation with the rector, other people like the treasurer and so forth. The rector's duties are defined in the prayer book: to preach, to teach, and to administer the sacraments. Now, distinctive roles, they work together on some level, and yet they are separate. And I hope as you go about your teachings today, that some of this will be kind of made more, made more visible to you about the role of the vestry and the rector. Because I hear a lot of it, and when churches kind of get ways with their rector or their vestry or somebody, these roles and how we're supposed to address them. If we could remember the first part of what I said earlier, all of us remember what it means to be faithful leaders, then I think that we can better understand our way in working relationships with one another.